The critique of a piece of media being style over substance has always been something that's really interested me. On one hand, it can be applicable to many different movies and can serve as a very valid complaint to highlight how, although said film is visually engaging, it puts a lot less focus on the more substantive elements such as characters, plot, or world building. But on the other hand, I found that this criticism can often be extremely shallow, and wrongfully applied to pieces of media that are of legitimately good quality. So today I shall be using some examples of movies that vary in quality, and explore the topic of style over substance. So, an example of a piece of media that I would criticize for being style over substance would be Birds of Prey. I think the film is very visually intriguing, especially with the way it utilizes color. It makes you so engaged with the visuals as you watch the creativity burst from the screen. But unfortunately, all of this focus on vibrant and slick action sequences is at the cost of a coherent story with likable, well fleshed out characters. The main issue with Birds of Prey is the overall lack of direction. There are so many new characters introduced whose backstories and motivations are just completely overshadowed, partly because there's too many main characters to juggle, but most of it seems to spawn from the fact that the film doesn't care. It's okay to want to be an unconventional comic book film, but when I'm not invested in any of your characters and the story is extremely lackluster, then I think it's very telling that your movie is all style, but no substance. So, an example of a piece of media that I would compliment for being style over substance would be Nobody, starring good old Bob Odenkirk. Yep, this channel is officially dedicated to talking about the legend. But anyway, Nobody is a really great movie that cuts the fluff and drives straight into the action. The film is written by the same guy behind the John Wick trilogy, and whilst those films have top-notch action, they also spend a lot of time exploring the more deep and tragic story through John Wick's past. Nobody, however, cuts this side out, and I'd argue for the better. The film begins with a montage of our main character, Hutch, going about his daily routine. The montage does a really good job at highlighting just how monotonous his life has gotten with each day blending into one. The goal of this montage is to communicate to us that Hutch is a simple, everyday, normal human being. He's nobody in particular, and it's not too long after in the film where we reach some conflict with his family home being burgled, and then we realize, okay, maybe this guy isn't a nobody. This guy is a guy you don't want to mess with. And the rest of the film is just him letting off steam. And the action set pieces are awesome. None of this floaty, too obviously choreographed nonsense. This stuff is real action with so much weight and impact behind it. And even though the film is extremely simple, it works so well. This film is very aware of what it is and plays to its strengths to the fullest extent. It does still make sure to incorporate the more meaningful character moments and the relatable factors, but it doesn't spend too much time lingering on those things. Nobody achieves exactly what Nobody intended to achieve. In fact, I think the intent of any film is extremely important to take into consideration, especially when you choose to make something that's a lot more unconventional. Edgar Wright's Baby Driver is what I'd consider to be a brilliant film, which delivers a very well crafted, meaningful story, but with a very unique visual and audible presentation, with every little bit of motion in the movie's universe matching whatever soundtrack Baby decides to play on his iPod. And this concept is much more effective than Tobey Maguire dancing down the street whilst no music is playing in universe. However, since the film's release back in 2017, I've spotted plenty of IMDb reviews and various articles that will complement the film's presentation, but proceed to call the more substantive elements bland. And whilst most people aren't calling the film inherently bad, I still strongly disagree with this notion, and I feel like Baby Driver, in a very niche way, has received an unfair reputation. Okay, so firstly, I understand the criticism. The film is very heavy on its concept of matching every little thing to the beat. And there are a couple goofy things to think about. I mean, in a general sense, it's amusing to think that Baby can be in this super tense situation, but a high priority for him will still be getting the right song at the ready. I think the funniest one for me is at the end when Jon Hamm's character Buddy shows up and presents Baby with his killer track. But the idea that he stole a police car, presumably stole an iPod because his property would definitely be surrounded by police at this point, installed Queen Brighton Rock, got it all set up, and then decided he wanted to kill Baby. When you put certain things that way, it really makes you think. But in general, these music cues are very appropriate. The opening scene, for example, establishes very well that Baby listens to music as a form of escapism, because the world he's surrounded himself in is very cruel. So it makes sense that he would still wear earphones, even in the more tense and serious situations. And my point here is that the style feeds into the substance and vice versa. Baby wearing his earphones does make for a good excuse for there to be all these crazy musical numbers throughout the film. But it also tells us a lot about his character and how introverted he is. How even though he's very observant, he'd rather close himself off to most people around him. And especially when we get to see some of the flashbacks, it becomes very clear that alongside his love for music, a huge reason why he needs that escapism, for why he needs that hum in the drum, is because of his childhood trauma. And that's the thing, a lot of this is extremely heartfelt stuff, but it's delivered in a very stylish way. I love occasionally going onto YouTube and watching the Hocus Pocus chase sequence because it's my favourite in the film, and I really enjoy the spectacle of it. But I also love occasionally rewatching the actual film for the heart of it, because it absolutely kills it in the style and the substance. So to conclude this video, I'm not going to connect the films I talked about today and arrive at some endpoint where I give a definitive answer on how to balance style and substance. But instead, I want to talk about the process with this very video. What was my goal with this video? Well, aside from the fact that I have a passion for talking about media, the goal was to deliver a point, with the hope of people not necessarily agreeing with my argument, but at least understanding it. Now, to achieve this goal, I wrote this script, most of it down the pub actually, and then typed it up later. I then used my very smooth and cool voice to read out this script. And I could have left it there. I could have just left it as a black screen. But I decided to take time out of my extremely busy life to edit visuals together and ensure that clips of what I was talking about perfectly aligned with my commentary. But none of this visual editing was necessary to convey the argument. But I wanted to make my video as visually engaging as possible, so that more entertainment value could be derived from it. Style and substance are so important in our entertainment, and the script is always the important foundation. But a foundation is pointless if nothing is going to be built upon it. And that's why you should not prioritize one aspect over the other. Dare I say, they should be perfectly balanced, as all things should be.